know that Meghan Markle's sort of moving to being an entrepreneur, the sort of person that wants to make you buy into her lifestyle. Well, part of the thing about buying into a lifestyle is that you want to really fancy that lifestyle. If you think about it, back in the golden days of Hollywood, the wonderful golden age, it was a lifestyle that we all dreamt about, wasn't it? Men in designer suits, dinner jackets, glamorous women in furs attending premieres, lots of money, lots of fame. And it was the sort of thing that each week, if you're of that particular era, you went out to buy picture goer, movie mags, and you fell in love with the stars. You believed all the lies that those publicity people behind those big machines, the Hollywood machinery, which was, of course, the likes of MGM, RKO, 20th Century Fox, well, they spun you a lie. We live in a very different world now in the 21st century. Seemingly, though, a little bit like Meghan Markle's Instagram posts. She's stuck in the past. But as ever, it's not her fault. So truly, who does the former royal known as the Duchess of Sussex now blame? And what is the next plan? As ever, let me explain. Morning chums, nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining me in the very heart of London, and welcome to another brand new episode of By Royal Appointment. It's interesting, when you do these longer versions, because you do get to learn a little bit more, and obviously it's nice to be able to share some more background with you. And a lot of the people, I have to say, on digital platforms and stuff, are very, very well equipped in knowing how, the sort of social media world works. I'm very honest with you about the fact that, I just do it for fun. But the other side of it is there is an art. There's big social media companies that show you how to post the right content at the right time to make the most impact. And really, when you think about it, it's taken over from TV ads, hasn't it? Who remembers SR, the very first toothpaste ad on commercial television over here way back in 1955? That caused an absolute uproar because people were suddenly, wow, we'll go out and buy it. This is exactly what social media is supposed to do. And this is exactly what Meghan Markle thought she could do. Pick up the pieces of her little known thing called the TIG. And if you think about it, that perpetual lie of Meghan rocking up with 5 million into the British monarchy because she was so successful, well, that was just a courtesy story. Then, of course, the palace let go because obviously they didn't want to let the world know that actually, as many people suspected, Meghan couldn't believe her luck. Finally, she was marrying somebody rich. She'd been searching for that rich person a long time. Oh yes, coming back and forth to London because she wanted a British boyfriend and she wanted to break in over here. Then when she met, of course, all thanks to a very sort of strange liaison when you think, because many people are not quite sure which version of events to believe. Which version of the meeting is it? Harry gives a different version, she's told a different version on her Netflix show. And this is part and parcel of the problem with the likes, of course, of Meghan and Harry. Complete lack of lies all the time. And then, of course, we get the new branded story, oh, Harry gave me cupcakes on our second date. It's now become a tradition. Does this woman look like she actually eats cupcakes? And there goes back to exactly the social media brand. You see, part of the problem that you have to do is to be able to believe that really you are slaving away, making troughs of jam, or indeed putting together fruit platters on a nonsical plate so that people think, what, they do that, I will do that. If you look back, as I say, at the golden age of Hollywood, you had the likes of Joan Crawford promoting Royal Cola. And of course, people bought it because, well, Joan drank it, didn't she? Many years later, she dumped Royal Cola because she'd married the boss, very rich boss, of Pepsi Cola, Al Steele. That's how fickle celebrities are. But you see, Meghan doesn't realise that now we see through this, and this is part and parcel of her problem. Now, moving forward, where it's interesting is she's hit the buffers with this brand. Make no mistake, chums, things are going very, very, very badly behind the scenes. The wine, another half-cocked idea that was supposedly going to take on the likes of Sir Cliff Richard and Kylie Minogue and all those other celebrity wine brands. Well, she loses interest. Meghan loses interest very quickly unless you totally embrace it, totally buy into it. I know I've referred to this before, but the 40 times 40. An incredible thing when you think, because she went all out to put it out, but it just went off with a whimper because people literally didn't support her in it. The other problem that Meghan has right now with the wine, for instance, is lots of comp bottles went out to lots of celebrities. A little bit like the jam, you get the picture. But a little bit unlike the Jam, should I say, well, a lot of ex-stars, friends, whatever you want to call them, are not sipping the success of Meghan's wine. This is because they're all promoting their own things. And this is where your problem lies. When you have, celebrities, you can't ask them to promote their stuff unless you're willing to promote their brand. Meghan never wants to counteract that. She never says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a quick plug for your tour, your album or whatever. Suddenly it's here it is and you're supposed to just love me because after all, I was for a short period of time a member of the British monarchy. Now the problem is that Meghan apparently feels that her brand has been dented by this. That's right, the British royal family. Even though she's very graciously still on their website, she's unhappy. I told you about this before. It doesn't list her, wonderful achievements. Do we know what they are? Oh yeah, suits. And anything else? Oh, writing to the washing up company. That's it. They're not listed on there, you see, a former actress. And Meghan feels this is also detrimental to her brand because without people knowing how successful she's become, is this also something like an albatross around her neck? But of course she's got a plan, and the new team are that plan, affectionately known in the Montecito household as the Disruptors. Now Prince Harry quite liked them to begin with, but apparently even that's starting to waver. Let me explain. Meghan Markle was ecstatic at this particular headline. Make no mistake about it, and this is from an excellent source. You see, this is Meghan at her very best, manipulating, well, not her personally, but of course her team. She sent over her trusted latest aide, and there have been many of them, Meredith Maines, who of course, if you think about it, has a very, very good connection to this particular reporter. After all, it was this particular reporter that seemingly got quite a few exclusives about the fake TV royal show, The Crown, of which Meredith used to work on. She's a tabloid publicist. And the bottom line is with Meredith, really, it's about headlines. It's about stopping people talking, looking at you. Meghan loves this sort of attention because consequently it's all about whether people like her or not. And if they're talking about her and they're looking at her, how beautiful she looks, all of that sort of stuff. You see, the fake story that they were absolutely frustrated that this meeting had got leaked out, as I told you, is farcical in itself. It's a classic tabloid setup. Meghan and Meredith, alongside Prince Harry, and as ever, I have to say allegedly, knew exactly what they were doing, right? Because the bottom line was they needed to let the world know that while King Charles didn't want to speak to his youngest son, well, he was reaching out. He was the bigger man, the better man. Now, just put this into context. His Majesty the King, whether you're a fan or not a fan, you have to remember, as I've often said, this is a man going through a very difficult time in his life. Not only, you forget about this in many respects, but he's having to come to terms with bereavement as well. He had his mother for a very long time, and we expect them to just wipe it away and move on. Bereavement can get you for many, many years later. And I've been told from an excellent source that, of course, His Majesty the King, King Charles, still has those very fragile moments. And you might think he's 70 odd. Your mum is your mum is your mum, right? And there lies your problem. We do know, of course, that the Duke of Edinburgh, His Royal Highness Prince Edward, he really struggled behind the scenes at the loss of his mum. But of course, that wouldn't bother the disruptors, the people behind the scenes. This is all about projecting a brand new image for Meghan and Harry. And when, of course, Harry sat down with the BBC, that was an interview put together by, yes, Meredith Maines. You see, he obviously very hot-headed, wanted to get his side of the story out. Now, a good publicist would have said, let's take 24, 36 hours. Let's go through it and talk about the bits that you really do want to bring up. But no, push straight into it. And, of course, in cohesion with the BBC, who didn't do any of their due diligence, didn't bother to check with the palace, and suddenly there you've got Harry, hot-headed, looking very, very deranged, almost like he couldn't keep control of his emotions, telling the world that, well, it wasn't his fault he'd lost. Somebody should have told him. Always somebody else's fault. You notice? And then the bombshell, well, he didn't know how long his father had got left. All very, very cruel things. This is because, whether he likes it or not, Harry has been brutally cut off by his family, and they've had to do that for the protection not only of their own sanity, but naturally for the healing process of His Majesty the King. What you have to remember, and what you can see in fact with King Charles, is he's surrounding himself with a lot of positivity, getting on with the job, cramming as much in as you can. I'm in awe actually of the amount of work that he gets through. Yes, he might get driven there and everything's done for him, but he's still turning up. He looks good and he's showing interest. We have to give respect where it's due. Could you be bothered doing all of that if you felt that ill? But no, he carries on. But of course his youngest son, no real reference to that, not about concerned about his health or he's worried or he's written to him or anything like that. He just didn't know how much longer he got left. Now, as I said, the publicist behind this, allegedly, Meredith Meghan. Meredith is a very pushy individual. Like all publicists, they like to be in the story themselves because this is what attracts the next client. You know, it's a bit like a lawyer. You'll notice that with divorce lawyers, you know, the big ones. They say like the one with, Paul McCartney and Heather Mills. They were almost as famous as the two people because other people might go to them with their business. It's a calling card. Apparently, according to the source, Meredith couldn't quite believe her luck that there she was, sat with the King's communications team. And guess what? Well, being snapped, but she had no idea. Right. Nobody really bought it. And of course, everybody knew exactly, particularly in the industry, how this story was planted together. But you see, the bigger picture behind that story was that, well, basically Meghan and Harry wanted the world to know that really they were trying their very best. Now, what's interesting is Meghan Markle could have done one or two things to change public perception of her. Yes, Meghan Markle Inc., whatever you want to call it. The fact that her brand's dying is because people don't buy into her. They see her as hard-faced, uncaring, and there are two sides to every story. Of course, the family that she wiped away, her much beloved father, Thomas Markle, well, we don't really know what apparently he's done because Meghan can't share it. But bet your bottom dollar, sadly the minute he's demised, Meghan's story will come out. You get the picture. As for her, half-sister Samantha and her brother, well, I would say if they'd have reined it in and done it slightly differently, people would have been a little bit more sympathetic. But moving forward, the game plan behind this didn't really help. Well, it did help for Meghan. People were talking about her. She loved it, couldn't believe it, particularly on the day that Catherine was going to be at Wimbledon. Oh yes, your big arch nemesis, Catherine, Princess of Wales, cannot abide her, whatever she says, because Catherine didn't bend to Meghan's will. She didn't want to be the sisterhood, didn't want to link arms going into Wimbledon, didn't want to take on the institution, the monarchy. So like everything in Meghan's life, she has to be wiped away, like her own family, like the family she disinvited to her own wedding, even though everybody knew, literally because the TV was on, there were plenty of spaces in that pew next to the Mother Doria. But of course, Meghan wants her own way. And the only person that she has left to bend at her will is the one with the most money. That's right, her husband, Prince Harry. But even he now is seeing some light, albeit not very clear. The problem when you lie so much like Meghan and Harry is that nobody now really believes you. And there lies the biggest problem for their marketing, publicity, communications team. You see, it's all very well claiming that you were highly frustrated. Yeah, highly frustrated indeed. But you need more. You need really more than that, don't you? It's a little bit like the ongoing battle regarding the conspiracy theories with the children, Archie and Lilibet, or Lily, whatever you want to call her. You see, when Meghan Markle, along with her brand new team, put out that particular disruptor video, the twerking video, which was, well, dubious to say the least. 4 years apparently. Yes, 4 years she's been sat on that. And as an ex-staff member told me, Meghan boasted about all the material that she had from the previous time, a short time inside the monarchy. Stuff apparently that would be shocking to the rest of the world. Right. But where this gets really interesting is, she felt that this would draw a line, well, underneath the conspiracy theories regarding the children. The only thing that would draw a line under the conspiracy theories are the things that Meghan and Harry have done themselves. Because quite frankly, the rest of the royal family's children all have very clear and concise records and details and sign-offs. All Meghan and Harry need to do would be to do something similar. They could either post them online, or she could do an interview and perhaps allow that information to go out. But no, they love the speculation, you see. By putting this video out with her baby mama dance. She sat down with the podcaster and said, "You watched it?" As I told you, every question rehearsed, knew everything in advance. Nothing goes to chance with the likes of Marital. But of course, this was there to say, "Oh, what did you think?" And as you can see, even in those moments, they were happy moments. Of course, they've given up the ghost with the fake story about the Queen zipping up and down, of course, to their cottage in the final few years of her life to see Lily, and the alleged picture that they had. As I told you before, if they'd got a picture of Her Majesty the Queen with Harry's daughter, well, we would have seen it by now. Trust me. The goal really right now, 100%, is to basically try and get some updated footage, some imagery. And nothing better than would be a picture with, say, Archie alongside His Majesty the King. And this is where Meghan and her team are really cruel but excel at, if you like this style of marketing. You see, it's very being honest that, if you look at the story, way back, of course, the King and his eldest son, Prince William, had moments, like all families do. They didn't necessarily get on, there was a bit of a gap. But the real bonding factor was once, of course, Catherine came onto the scene. She could see exactly how to get that sort of relationship working. The bigger problem was for Meghan, though, that she couldn't be part of it, Obviously, she saw very quickly when she joined the monarchy that Harry was, in fact, the Spare, the book that he, of course, made him famous. And for Meghan, she thought that she was going to be this new darling of the monarchy. She was going to be the superstar. People were wanting to know her. And at the very start, she had a very, very incredibly warm welcome. But the bigger picture for Meghan was she always wanted more. I mean, the fake Hollywood background, the fact that, of course, she'd done so well in the world of acting. She hadn't. And she was desperate to make sure that this particular role she could hold on to. Couldn't win over the Queen. The Queen saw right through her. In fact, we know really what the Queen thought about her because it's all now documented. But you see, people like Meghan don't take that into heed. Narcissists will not have it. It's always somebody else's fault. As I told you, the problems with the branding her as ever brand, well, she talked about at the beginning of the year, Netflix wanted to get involved, and I thought about it. Oh, please. You didn't think about it for any time. You were desperate. You wanted to get somebody else involved and, of course, together. What people don't know about Prince Harry is that, well, he's a nice chap. There's no two ways about it, but there's not a lot going on. And I'm not being unkind, he's not the sort of person that you could have a deep and meaningful conversation with, because really all throughout his life, people, and there's a lot of people to blame for this, have mollycoddled him, the sort of person, chums. It's the sort of guy that, if you go off kilter and you're not talking about them, or indeed making sure that their feelings aren't hurt and that you fully agree with them, whether it be about the taste of baked beans, a political thing, you just have to agree to make sure that you keep it sweet, because otherwise things can turn nasty. This is the problem you've got to imagine that both Catherine and William and other senior members of the monarchy have had to endure. That was all right in the beginning because obviously they could control this. Once you've got somebody else feeding that ego on a regular basis, it becomes a lot more problematic. Now, recently I was talking to someone who worked with Harry very closely over here at the World Child Awards, and they're a very sweet person and very nice and, one of the big wigs, if you like. And the bottom line was they were saying that they could not understand Harry's inability to make, basic small talk around a table. Now, I put it to them that, well, could it be the fact that whatever he says, is he frightened that maybe this will be escalated? And she said, no, but if you're just talking about anything like the weather or maybe something you've bought, like a new garden accessory or something, nothing goes. But, the minute you talk about the victim culture, suddenly you're back on form and we're on to a long conversation. And this really, one might suspect, is, well, where, of course, Meghan and Harry bonded so well. They're both victims. They both love playing the victim. And this is their now, what bonds them, as I say, united together. Now, as we know, with this shambolic attempt to sort of start this reconciliation, whatever you want to call it, the thing is, Harry, if you remember, utilised this once more. You see, when he sat down, he said, he didn't want a constitution or a monarchy. He just wanted a family. Now, the reason why he zipped off with Meghan Markle was because the family was going to be her and the two children. Suddenly she was going to take care of him, make sure that their wealth was all put together, because she's a genius, even though she's been in a two-bit soap opera. And suddenly Harry once again had found a mothering figure. Then, when that didn't work out, he decided that actually it was his family's fault once again. One thing that, of course, he never had a problem with upon this meeting, this liaison, this get-together, whatever you want to think. And this, again, is where all the stumbling blocks are really there. But now the problem is this, because, of course, as we know, His Majesty the King, ill health, and all that sort of stuff, all the pressures that go with that, Harry's pushing hard. And one of the things that he really wants to have, and this is where I find this particularly interesting, is, as we know, in the public domain, there's now no longer any recognition for non-working royals, right? And where this is interesting is Harry believes, and this is from an excellent source, that particularly if, of course, His Majesty the King wants to offer this, welcome back, this at least acknowledgement of a semblance of a family, then he, this forthcoming birthday, should have that. We know Harry's back in town, of course, in September, because this is this big event that he always wants to attend. And I'm sure his heart's in the right place. But, charity is now the only thing left. And when you look at it, charitable companies are very much struggling themselves, simply because people are giving less and less. They can't afford to. And, the ones that haven't exactly seen much of a return. Not knocking him, this just goes throughout any charitable event. Now, again, where this gets more interesting, in my opinion, is that this places more pressure on the king because he's ruled that out. I'm sure privately there's a card, and I'm sure there's no doubt a message, and perhaps even a private phone call. We don't know it all, but it's not about knowing it all. Harry and Meghan want public recognition. You see, in a sense, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you may say, well, perhaps there's no card. I believe that if there was a card, it would have been very much placed in the background of a said picture so people could see, look, there's an up-to-date card. They will utilise and monetize everything. We've seen this with Meghan regularly, lying about using the HRH just privately. That's absolute rubbish. She uses this, as do her team, to try and procure things, particularly for, publicity, etc. The reason why, of course, she doesn't use this in print is because we're told she doesn't want all that fuss, which is rubbish. Really, she'd love people to address her as Her Royal Highness, goes right back to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, one pushing for it and one, of course, capitalising on it. We've seen that Meghan did not get caught out with this. She wanted all of that to come to fruition. But as for Harry and the King, well, again, it goes back to two things. Famously, he said he wanted a public apology, and, that wasn't forthcoming. And also now, according to the source, Harry believes his forthcoming birthday would be a start to regaining what he believes he lost, which was his family. With the Angola shambles also now at the fruition, people are asking, well, what happened to Meghan Markle? Well, it's really two things, in fact. Meghan herself can't really go wandering around landmines, can she? Then saying, actually, that's not as dangerous as coming back here to the United Kingdom. You can understand, even she's not that dim. But, of course, Harry also likes the idea of this being his re-emergence, resetting, the regrouping from the disruptors to remind people that, in fact, he is his mother's son by recreating yet again that walk. One wonders whether he'll start to dress up and sit at the Taj Mahal, It's becoming so desperate. And the problem is that Harry doesn't really know who his audience is anymore, and that's the other problem. We know that Meghan Markle's audience is really a very mixed bag. You see, if Meghan had played it very cleverly, very well, she could have had, if she'd have worked it out, perhaps a huge gay following. Something along the lines, of course, of Kylie Minogue, the way that Kylie's done very well with her music, with her acting, with her branding, selling wine. And the gay world absolutely love her because she's glamorous, fun, etc. You could have easily developed that, but of course Meghan likes to take herself way too seriously, always with those very serious messages. Which comes to this point as well, which many people have casually overlooked. Netflix have asked for a meeting. Some suggest a crisis meeting. And this is down to the fact that, once again, as had happened with Spotify, right, Meghan loses interest. And this is the problem. Her attention span is very, very limited. In fact, perhaps just to the end of one sentence. And the problem that they have is they're not seeing really any proactivity. You know, they've got the wine out and that's about it. And the jam's sort of been slaughtered. And, you know, when you see these reviews of certain things, there are certainly, definitely paid reviews. And others, of course, like the tabloid newspapers over here in the United Kingdom, you wouldn't expect anything less. You know, people will rip it to shreds because half the time these are the papers that have been sued by the Sussexes. Why would they give it a glowing review? As I said, I'm not a drinker, so I'm not the person to ask. But behind the scenes now, Netflix staff are pondering exactly what they're going to be doing next, because it's umming and ahhing about the second series. When do they put this out? Which is, of course, as we all know, the first series chopped up. There wasn't much appetite for the first one, so really they're hoping that Meghan might now do some promotional stuff to try and kickstart it. One of the ideas is once again looking at, well, podcasters that might be lenient towards her. The ones that she's done so far have just been ridiculed to the high max. I don't know about you, I found that Emma tried her best. You know, I think because she's a successful person independently, she didn't necessarily need it. She wanted to raise her profile. The other one, Jama, I just found her very, very funny. And ultimately, I think all the spoofs that come out online, it's very hard, sorry, I've got the giggles, but it's very hard to take it seriously when you have a situation like that where somebody gets it and spoofs it so brilliantly. You know what I mean? You must have seen them. It's the power of yet and all of that ridiculousness that just, you know, and Meghan alarming everybody by saying she sends emails, you know, to her kids every night, but she hasn't got time to make meals. She's time to sit down and write a lengthy email that they may or may not read in 10, 15 years' time. You get the picture. Now, also what's really developing behind the scenes is that Netflix, if she loses that, and it's going the same way as 40 times 40, because apparently there are problems with ideas, with pushing forward, she won't make a decision. The new staff come in, they've got no idea what they're doing. It's an absolute shambles behind the scenes. The contact that I have is a great person, and he slipped up there, but is a great person because, as he said, he loves working there simply because it's so shambolic, you know. Nobody ever knows what they're absolutely doing. It changes by day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. And the other problem is that each day comes along is a new idea that may or may not last the full working day. So obviously Netflix have big problems on their hand as well. But back to this, which was the big start of wiping Catherine off the front pages. And whatever people say, this came from Meghan Markle. I do not care that they're frustrated. Suddenly this got leaked out. It's a complete tabloid get-together, tipped off, as I told you, by all of those people working in and around that particular camp. What I find strange, and I have very, very hard to believe, chums, is the fact that Harry can be really that dense, wondering how come these stories get into the media when there's only the two of us that know about them. Right, so maybe Meghan's going off to the 9th bathroom or whatever and making a private call. Maybe you should wander around, Harry, listen in a little bit more. Stop playing with the chickens, you know what I'm saying? Either way, this is absolutely crumbling around their ears. Now, I've been told from an excellent source inside the palace that King Charles definitely wouldn't mind some sort of reconciliation with his son, at least particularly, you know, in the situation that he's in. And obviously, I would imagine would like to meet the grandchildren that he's never met, but also feels very, very bad, as one can imagine, not just for himself, but also for Thomas Markle. How would that look in, you know, the public domain? And he does feel that, you know, he's a kind man, whatever people think. And that really would rub salt in the wounds of a man equally going through illness, you know, health conditions, whatever. And that's one of the stumbling blocks that His Majesty the King is really, really concerned about. And again, this goes back to the point of, well, if you want to make up with one, why can't you make up with two? The bigger issue, of course, Thomas Markle doesn't really have that much to offer, which is very sad. Of course, His Majesty the King does. And both Meghan and Harry know that once His Majesty the King sadly does leave us, well then they're curtains. So they've got to get in quick, got to get in now and at any cost. And they're pushing all the buttons once again, just ahead, as I pointed out, of that Balmoral holiday. Either way, as I often say here, chums, It's a developing story. And as ever, thank you for taking the time out to watch this brand new episode of By Royal Appointment. If you can, please like, share and comment respectfully. And until next time, do take care.